Welcome to our Summer Safety Food Grilling and Sun webinar, which is part of our Live Well and Stay Healthy series that we've been doing now on the first Tuesday of every month. We started that series in December and still going strong and have a great schedule through the rest of this year, of this calendar year. So thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started. So just to give you a little bit of a picture of how we all work together in the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station, we are part of the Family and Community Health Sciences Department, and our focus is in nutrition and wellness, food, nutrition, and wellness. But there are lots of other partners that we have in our offices. We have agriculture. We have, many of you probably know that we have master gardeners because they're very visible as well. You can participate in 4-H programs. There's just so much to choose from. If you go to the Rutgers website, you can see the wonderful array of programs, presentations, and activities and events that we have going on. But today we're going to talk about summer safety. And in particular, we're going to talk about food and grilling. And also we'll talk a little bit about sun and heat safety. And isn't this just the greatest summer to be talking about that? It's been more hot than it seems it ever has been. So we need to be paying attention to that. It keeps us healthy and it keeps us protected. So we'll start with food safety, and hopefully there aren't any surprises that you'll see here. Maybe you'll learn something along the way, but some of this you've probably seen before and heard before in other presentations. Well, we know hand washing has become very much focused on in the past year or so, but hand washing has always been important and absolutely necessary when we are handling food. So if you're handling food in your kitchen and your children are helping you, then everyone needs to wash their hands with warm or hot soapy water and dry them with paper towels that can be disposed of. We don't use our kitchen towels for drying our hands because then we could be just passing along bacteria and germs. So hand washing is still so important, and it will continue to be important. Also, having a clean surface to work with is very important. If your hands are clean and your surface is dirty, you're still going to have some issues with potential bacteria and that type of thing. So make sure your surfaces, your counters, any food preparation surfaces you're going to be using, maybe at your kitchen table, are clean. And you want to make sure that you've cleaned them thoroughly with a food safe type of cleaner. And that you maybe, I will use the word rinse them carefully, but I don't expect you to hose them down. I want you to take paper towels that are just wet and wipe them down a couple of times until everything dries very, very well before you start working on your food surfaces. And how about cutting boards? These are so important. And one cutting board doesn't really fit the bill for the type of cooking we do in our homes today. And all of these rules apply out in the industry as well, in a commercial kitchen and a restaurant. We use different cutting boards for different purposes. And for instance, you would have one cutting board for meat, especially raw meat, because we don't ever want to cross-contaminate raw meat with something else. You may have a cutting board that's for poultry products, one that's for seafood and fish products, and one that's for vegetables and fruits. That way, you really pretty much eliminate the risk of cross-contamination, assuming that you clean these cutting boards or cutting surfaces very thoroughly after they're used. I have a set that I've had for a long time that I really like that actually says on each piece, fruits and vegetables, and it's a certain color, and the raw meat cutting board is a different color. The poultry one is yet another color, so that they're visual. When I go to grab them out of the cabinet, I know which one I'm looking for whatever I'm working on today. So clean your cutting surfaces very, very carefully, hot soapy water, and allow them to dry. And you can allow them to air dry, especially if you have a wooden surface, but allow them to air dry too, because that gives them a chance to kind of make sure that all of the whatever contaminants could be around have dried up. Also, we want to make sure about our food storage. This is absolutely key to food preparation and to anything we're going to talk about today with food. But every day, it's an everyday issue is your food storage. You need to keep your perishables in the refrigerator. And if you are using seafood, and I'm talking about seafood and fish today, because we're talking about summer safety and picnics. So if you're using those types of foods, you want to keep them in the refrigerator and on ice. Make sure they stay very, very cold so that we make sure we don't have any issues with something spoiling before we get to the part of actually preparing the food. Leftovers is something, oh boy, we just forget about sometimes. I'm sure you have found some really great treasures hidden in the back of your refrigerator once in a while. Maybe doesn't look so good, maybe has some strange looking colors growing on it. If leftovers are set aside for more than 2 to 3 days, the best practice is to eat them within that time period. There are some things that you can go 5 to 6, maybe even 7 days with, but for the most part, make sure that the food that you're eating that is left over and you're serving your family is safe and free from various types of bacteria that could form on it. So 2 to 3 days is the amount of time you should have it stored in your refrigerator. I know you're probably thinking that you eat some foods that you've had in your refrigerator longer than that. I'm just telling you, these are the facts. So do what you need to do to keep your family safe. So let's start with thinking about a picnic. Summertime and the fall, even the spring, great times for picnics. We want to be very careful when we're planning our picnic and preparing the tools, the utensils, the storage containers that we're going to be using before we get ready for the picnic. It will save you so much time if you do some of this ahead of time. Any containers you're using, meaning lunch bag, and your cooler too. You want to clean them out with hot soapy water and allow them to dry before you get ready to start packing your picnic. So that's a good thing to do maybe the night before you're going on a picnic, get everything cleaned up and ready to go, can dry overnight, and you'll be ready to work in the morning on getting that great picnic together. We want to make sure when we're packing a picnic that the containers we're using are appropriate for what we're doing. I have some glass containers that I absolutely love for home use, but they don't work for a picnic. We don't want to take anything breakable. We want to use our plastic containers or containers that are easy to clean and even the right size to fit in your cooler. I'm sure you have some containers that you would think, wow, this is going to be great. I need to make this huge pasta salad for the family picnic. And then you go to put it into your cooler and you realize it doesn't fit. So make sure you look over all your containers and you prepare those containers by cleaning them, but think of what's going to fit in your cooler and also what is easy to open once you get to your picnic site. It's also important, maybe one of the most important things is to choose the foods that are easy to prepare and store, meaning keep at the proper temperatures, keep them cold or keep them hot until your picnic time. We're also going to choose foods that are easy to eat at a picnic because we don't have always have the amount of hand washing facilities that we may need. And that's another thing to think about. Make sure you have some hand wipes for everyone. Make sure you're, probably disposable silverware and disposable plates to make your life easier preparing for the picnic and also the cleanup for the picnic too. So what are some really good picnic items? You could probably answer this question yourself, and you probably have some favorites. Fruits and vegetables, for the most part, are wonderful foods to have at a picnic because they can be prepared ahead of time. They can be washed, cut, peeled, whatever they need. They can be placed in Ziploc bags or small containers so that they are ready to use and ready to serve. Another thing that works really well would be like your dried fruits, raisins, for example, and other dried fruits, and maybe even dried vegetables too, and some ready to eat cereals because children love to crunch on something. Adults do too. So put that in a container, seal it up, and have all of that ready to go. Of course, if you're traveling with children, the easiest go-to, if it's possible, would be some type of a nut butter and jelly sandwich if the children are able to eat that because they store really well. There's less chance of them going bad over a period of time in your cooler. Oatmeal cookies are always a good one too. Pretty much any cookies, but I did put oatmeal there for a reason because I was hoping that we would have a little bit of a healthy twist on our picnic that we're getting ready for. This is very important. And I find that lots of people don't know this fact that melons are very much a source for foodborne illness. And the issue is in their skin, in the rind. It's actually on the outside of the skin in the rind. So it seems a little strange, but you need to do this. You need to take a few seconds to carefully wash the outside of your melon before you cut it. Make sure you do it before you cut it. So not so much with soapy water, but with water, maybe a paper towel, kind of, rub the water around it really good, rinse it really well, maybe dry it, pat it dry with a paper towel. And then you're ready to work with it. So once you've cut your melons, you want to put them in a container that works really well for your picnic. Maybe something that has to fit into your cooler because you want to keep them cold. Once you have cut melons of any type, you need to refrigerate them right away and keep them cool, just like you would keep any other food cool for your picnic. So what about packing raw foods? Sometimes we go on a picnic and we want to cook burgers at the picnic site or cook chicken or fish or something like that. We want to make sure that those foods are ready to use. So maybe in a Ziploc freezer bag or food storage bag. And you want to keep these raw foods away from the ready to eat foods. So you want to have a separate place for them, a separate cooler for them, if possible. That's not with the fruits and vegetables that you're taking on your picnic. So try to keep that in mind. Maybe you can have a separate small cooler and make sure you have lots of good ice or ice packets or something in there to keep that food cold because those are the foods that are most perishable and most likely to cause danger down the road if you're not handling them correctly. So keep them very, very cold. Keep them cold and maybe re-ice them if you have to. If you're out for a long day and it's very hot, you may need to add some ice to them to make sure they stay cold throughout the time before you're able to cook them. So another little tip, and this is something that you would do at home and not just at a picnic, is not to put cooked foods on a plate that was used for raw foods. So here's an example. If we are grilling hamburgers tonight, I would have them prepared on a plate and my husband would be the one to cook them on the grill outside. And he knows that once he puts those burgers on the grill, that I take back the plate, the utensils, and I'll get a clean plate for him for when the food is cooked, and I'll clean any utensils. Any food that has been raw, in particular, your meats, poultry, fish, we want to make sure that we keep all of our other foods safe by not offering an opportunity for cross-contamination. So never mix the two. Always start with a clean plate. So how about some beverages? Wouldn't be a picnic without beverages, right? We can have, bottles of water or a container, of iced tea that we're going to pour from, or lemonade or something like that, or juices. We're going to chill them before we put them into the cooler. So this is your practice, even if you're just taking your lunch to work. You should chill whatever foods need to be chilled, and including your beverages, so that when you put them in your lunch bag or your cooler, that you're starting off cold. If we put them in when they are at room temperature, then we're going to have a very hard time getting them to stay cold in the period of time before we get ready for our picnic. It's also a very good idea to have a separate cooler for your drinks, and maybe label that cooler that these are where the beverages, the water, the juices for the kids or whatever, so that that cooler is separate from the others. And everybody knows that when they want something to drink, that's the cooler they go to. It's good to keep them away from your raw foods in particular, and some of your other foods that you have in another cooler. And when you're traveling, try not to keep the cooler in the trunk of your car. I mean, if you have to until you get to your picnic site, then that's fine. But once you get to your picnic site, get your cooler out of the car so that it's not in that very, very hot place. Maybe you can keep it under the shade of a tree or something to help the ice and the cold ingredients inside to stay cold longer. I was ahead of myself, wasn't I? Keep the lid closed too on your cooler. It makes your foods last so much longer. And also make sure you have a place where you can get ice if you need it to kind of refill. And most convenience stores sell ice, so you can always know where the nearest one is, so that when you need ice or you feel that your food is not staying cold enough, that you can get a bag of ice real quick. So how about some food safety basics? Now, you may know some of this. You probably do, but it's always good to review these numbers, because these are so important to keep our food safe. Having food poisoning is not a fun thing, I can tell you. You want to make sure we don't endanger our family or ourselves with food that is not stored at the proper temperatures. So food is very safe between a certain number of degrees. Usually 40 and just above starts the beginning of the danger zone, between 40 degrees and 140. So for example, your refrigerator probably is at about 36 or 37 degrees. It would be just above freezing. So think about that. If you had food out of the refrigerator, or you lost your power for a considerable amount of time and the food started to go above 40, we start to get to that danger zone. That's when food is most likely to become contaminated. And you can see that that would be between 4 and 60 degrees if we're using Celsius for our measurement. Rule of thumb, do not allow food to remain at room temperature for longer than 2 hours. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, that's just great, but sometimes it doesn't work that way, right? You have family and you have food out. You need to be vigilant about this. It's very important that food is kept at the proper temperature. So if you are having a picnic, for example, and I just did this the other day, I made a corn and black bean salad, and it was really delicious. And I took a bowl, a plastic bowl that had a lid, and that's where the food was stored, in the refrigerator, until I left. And then I had that bowl then sitting in a larger bowl that was filled with ice. So I can keep that food cool on the counter a little bit longer at a party or a picnic. So think about that. Do you have a container, a serving bowl that you can set inside another bowl, or inside a pan of some kind with ice in it? That will help you to keep your food at a safe temperature for a little bit longer than 2 hours. But that's the rule of thumb, 2 hours, and then it has to be refrigerated again. So you want to be sure to discard any foods that are not stored properly, have been sitting out for hours, that were not refrigerated for longer than 2 hours. Don't save those foods for leftovers. They are not considered safe. It's a when in doubt, throw it out kind of thing. You have to live by that. If there is any question, don't take any chances. Don't endanger anyone's health. If the temperature would be above 90 degrees outside at this time of year in the summer, then you really should discard the food after 1 hour. And I know I can't see you or hear you, but I can just imagine what some of you were thinking. You need to protect that food because that protects the people that are consuming the food. So find ways to keep the food as cool as possible for as long as possible. And how about grilling? Let's talk about grilling for a few minutes because summertime is such a great time for grilling. And if you're like me, you like to grill all different times of the year. A food thermometer is really a wise investment. And I know they can be kind of pricey. The one in this particular picture here is a little bit pricey, but there are other models you can buy that will very quickly check the temperature, the internal temperature of your food. You need to check that. So if you have, you're cooking to a certain number of degrees on your grill, you want to check it to make sure it's right. So, for example, your ground beef, veal, lamb, and pork, you need to get to at least 160 degrees. And I usually look for about 165. I think that's usually the rule of thumb for the temperature, for the internal temperature for those foods when you're cooking them. That doesn't matter if you're grilling or not, but with grilling, we need to be very careful because the heat tends to be very, very hot on the outside of the food, but we want to make sure that internal temperature is where we want it to make sure it's safe and healthy for everyone. Poultry should also be cooked to a pretty much the same temperature, about 165 degrees, and pork as well. They all kind of work around the same temperature. Your fish is the one that's a little bit different. Your fin fish, you would cook to about 145 degrees Fahrenheit. And obviously with fish, you see a big change in its color and the way it behaves as it cooks. So the flesh of the fish gets a little bit different and the flesh separates very easily with a fork. That's when you know your fish is done. But check the temperature too. So, and you can actually train yourself to pretty much sense the temperature of the food. If you check the temperature enough times with different foods, you can pretty much tell you're getting close because you don't want to check the temperature all the time. You want to check it when you think it's ready or it's about ready. If you're cooking some shellfish like shrimp, lobster, crabs, they turn a color, obviously, when they are cooked. They get kind of a little bit more pink and opaque when they're cooked. So you have a visual on that. It would be pretty difficult to check the temperature on some of those foods because they're small, but you know when they're finished. If you've cooked them enough times, you can see that they change in texture and color pretty much when they're ready. So this is very important, and we don't often think about this, and sometimes we don't even talk about it enough. And that is that you should cook your food thoroughly all at one time. So what I'm saying is you're not going to partially cook your meat and then put it refrigerated or let it stand and then bring it back out and cook again. You're going to cook something until it's finished, because when you partially cook food, that's when you're giving bacteria a wonderful opportunity to grow, because the temperature of the food would be at that danger zone above 40 degrees. So think about that and do that in the house when you're cooking and out on the grill too. Do you marinate foods when you're having a barbecue or a picnic? I like to marinate, but there's some special rules to follow when you're marinating, and it's super, super simple. In fact, the picture to the left really shows my favorite way of marinating, and that would be in a Ziploc bag, so that we're not handling the meat product too much, and our hands are very clean, and we put our marinade in there, seal up the bag, kind of smush the bag around a little bit so the marinade touches all parts of the meat, and then put it into the refrigerator. Marinating should happen in the refrigerator. So this is not the time to add your marinades to food in a bowl on the counter and just let it sit there. You need to keep it in the refrigerator. So when you're creating this marinade, if you have any marinade that you want to use later on the food, you need to separate that from the marinade that the meat has been sitting in the raw state. Okay. If you're using marinade, then use it. Have some set aside if you plan to use it for additional, adding some more onto your food as it's cooking or at the end of the cooking. Save that, keep it refrigerated until you need it and you go to use it again. That keeps your food really safe. So how about some grilling tips? Of course, we always talk about fruits and vegetables and, remind people that we should be eating half of our diet should be fruits and vegetables. So grill lots more fruits and vegetables. Vegetables grill so easily. And I use a wire grill basket for that. That works really well because we don't want our veggies or fruits to be falling in between the grates on the grill. That works really, really well. Or maybe a small grill pan where you can cook something. Veggies cook so beautifully on the grill and they just get this amazing taste. And they also cook very quickly too. Same thing with fruit. It takes a little bit of practice, sort of get the hang of how to grill a peach without it sticking to the grill and without it falling through the grates. But try these types of foods. Grilled pineapple is really awesome, and that's pretty easy to do too. If you're looking at your menu, it's wise to choose your poultry products or fish over the red meat products. Red meat is an important part of our diet for many people, but we have to limit the amount of times that we're consuming red meat in a week. So if we could kind of switch off and get some poultry in there, and the recommendation is to have fish 2 times a week. That gives you a nice balanced diet and an opportunity to kind of give your body a little bit of a break from the red meat when you have to. So marinate your protein food. So this would be your meat products, or it could be your fish products. And you want to very lightly marinate any seafood because it absorbs so much. Then you want to marinate them before you grill. This would be your beef, pork, lamb types of foods. And turn them frequently. And this is really important to reduce the production of cancer-causing substances. When you're grilling meat and you're charring meat, when it gets that black charred part of it, the research does say that that can cause cancers if it's consumed over a long period of time. So try not to char your meat so much, get your nice grill marks on it and then call it quits. Don't let it get to the point where it's so black and charred. It's really not good for you. Also, you may need to think about how to keep those flare-ups from happening on a grill so that you're not getting all that opportunity for the char to happen. So if you put some aluminum foil on the grill first, and you can always poke holes in that. That's what I do. I use a big fork, poke some holes in the foil, and that allows the fat to drain out of the food. And it really helps to keep you from having those flare-ups where all of a sudden your food is just engulfed in flames. You can pre-cook protein foods, in particular ribs, spare ribs or country ribs or whatever you're cooking. If you cook them first, and I've heard people say they cook them in the crock pot or they cook them in a slow oven for a couple of hours first, then you can finish them on the grill. And finishing them on the grill just gives it that opportunity to get that little bit of a crispier edge. I'm not talking about a charred edge, but to get that nice look of the grill registration marks always look nice on food. and also to get that flavor, perhaps that charcoal flavor. You want to make sure you're choosing some lean cuts of meat. That helps you to decrease the amount of fat drippings that you're going to be getting on your coals and on your grill. That will reduce the opportunity for flare-ups too. If you are cooking with coals, it's always good to cook in the center of the grill and to move your coals to the sides to keep the fat from dripping on them. So you would have your coals all across the grill to start with. When it gets very hot, you just use a tool to just gently push the coals to the side so that you still have the heat, but not necessarily that intense opportunity for flames right over top of the coals. You can grill in smaller pieces to help to decrease the exposure time to the high heat and the opportunity for getting charred. For example, chicken breasts. Sometimes chicken breasts can be pretty large, so I often cut them in half, and then we have smaller pieces to work with on the grill. And it's easier to control when that food is cooked to the temperature that it needs to be cooked to. You want to take off any charred parts of your protein foods. So cutting them away is a good idea before serving them. So you can barbecue in your oven, right? I've done this and it really works pretty well. In your oven, you can use your favorite grilling sauce or seasonings on chicken breasts or whatever types of food and cook them in your oven, perhaps at a high heat for a shorter period of time to have a really great flavor. So this is important. I mean, if you take one thing away today, this is it. Keep cold foods cold and keep hot foods hot. When you're preparing your foods from that time that you've prepared them, if you're going on a picnic and you're going to take hot soup, let's say we're going on a winter picnic, then make sure the soup is hot in a thermos and it stays hot in the thermos until you use it. We don't want it to get to that unsafe temperature. Your cold foods, like your salads, they need to be kept cold in a cooler until you are ready to serve them. And then they need to be cooled, chilled afterwards. But honestly, with a picnic, it's a good idea not to have leftovers. And I know you're probably ready to throw tomatoes at me or something. But honestly, if food has not been kept at the proper temperature for the proper amount of time, it's a good idea to discard it at the end of the picnic. Sorry. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about sun safety. The recommendations from CDC has changed over the years. Just not too many years ago, the recommendation was that a 15 SPF was appropriate. And if you used it every 90 minutes, that was considered safe. That has changed. And now a 30 SPF is what the recommendation is. Now, you can certainly purchase SPFs that are much higher than that, but the recommendation from the CDC is at least a 30. So we could actually even say a 30 plus SPF is best to protect you from the sun. It's a good idea to avoid midday exposure, meaning between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. And this is if you're going to be out in the sun for a long period of time, protecting your skin. It's nice to get a little bit of a tan, but do it safely, because if not, then you're really not going to like some of the outcomes down the road. You can wear loose fitting clothing to protect your arms, long pants to protect your legs, a big wide brimmed hat protects your face and neck and your ears and your head really well too. And if you're going to be in the water, it's really great to wear a very light layer. They call these rash guards. And I see so many young children wearing them these days. It's really an awesome thing. It helps to protect their skin when they're out in the sun, because these clothings do have an SPF capacity to them. And usually it's around 50 SPF. So that's really good to know, right? And they have them for adults too. Don't be afraid to give one a try. When it comes to sunscreen, Americans really don't use enough sunscreen. That's what all the research says. You should use a palmful, which is about 1 ounce of sunscreen 30 minutes before your sun exposure. So that gives the sunscreen a chance to sort of like settle into your skin and, give you the best protection for the times when you are out in the sun. And you should reapply every 90 minutes. Sunscreen should also be worn on cloudy days. So think about that. If it's not a very sunny day today and you're planning a picnic at the beach and you think, well, it's not sunny, I don't have to worry about it. You do have to worry about it, and you should be protecting your skin and the skin of especially children, because they really don't know any better sometimes. So we need to really train them about sun exposure and what's safe. What about heat exposure? Heat can be also very, very dangerous for us. And as you can see, age, obesity, depending on the prescription drugs you may be taking, alcohol, fever, heart disease, there's so many issues that increase the stress on your body when you are in the heat. So if it's a hot day and you have any of those issues that you see there and even more issues, then you need to be really, really careful about the time in the heat. You need to limit the length of exposure in the heat, especially if you're in the sun on a very, very hot day. You should be drinking lots and lots of water on a very hot day. Don't wait until you're thirsty to drink water. You need to be refreshing and rehydrating your body all along. Even on a day that's not hot, you should be drinking lots of water. But when the heat gets ramped up, or you visit a climate that has a very, very dry heat, you're going to need to be drinking more water than you're used to. Also, avoid strenuous outdoor activities during the heat of the day. Perhaps you can do those activities early in the day, early in the morning, or later in the evening. And also avoid hot and very heavy meals, heavy foods, because your digestive system gets involved in the heat too, and it kind of slows down a little bit. So you don't want that. You need to be very, very careful about taking care of your body and maybe the bodies of your children on a very hot day. We need to enjoy the outdoors. It's wonderful for our well-being, for our mindset, for our brain health, for our physical health. Getting out in the fresh air, taking a walk, taking a hike, just enjoying a beautiful scene. It's all so good for us in so many ways. These are the greatest of mindful moments when you get to look at a beautiful scene or a view or enjoy the outside. So do it. Go out, enjoy the outside, but protect yourself. Think about your hydration. What are you drinking? Are you drinking lots of water? Think about your skin protection. Are you covering your skin with sunblock and perhaps light clothing over the top? Are you protecting your head and your face? Go out and enjoy it, but do it safely. So let's just summarize. What are my next steps? What are we going to do to help to make this information part of our healthy lifestyle? Well, we're always going to try to have a diet that is full of healthy foods. So lots of fruits and vegetables. The recommendation is to have fish twice a week, limit the red meats, those types of things. And the recommendation is that half of your plate would be fruits and vegetables. So you're going to eat lots of vegetables, and you're going to look for protein foods that are not necessarily in meat products, because your legumes, your beans, whole grains, nuts, and seeds have lots of protein in them. So they're great substitutes for meat. And they also make really awesome snacks to give you some good protein in your day. According to the Blue Zones research for the healthiest communities in the world, People like to socialize as we do. So socialization is a very important part of our lives. So if you have an opportunity to get together, friends, family, have that picnic outside, then this is a great time to do that. You want to be active every day. And that means just keep yourself moving around. I mean, we all deserve some rest, and that's good, but we do need to have some physical activity in our day. Doesn't have to be intense. It can be just moving around your house or outside of your house, taking a little walk here and there, walking the dog a little bit more, just going outside a little bit more, even in the wintertime, just for a few minutes to be active and just kind of enjoy that environment. We all need to get enough sleep and rest. If we don't get enough sleep and rest, we wake up stressed in the morning, and that stress will stay with us all day. And actually, it will only get worse as the day goes on because stress tends to accumulate. So, work towards getting enough rest, get enough sleep. I know for a lot of people that is quite a challenge, but we need to work at that and find, what behaviors we need to adopt to get ourselves to sleep a little bit easier. Not eating a heavy meal 3 to 4 hours before going to bed is a good idea. Limiting the amount of liquid you consume perhaps after dinner, not having snacks after dinner. The drill, the way to get yourself to sleep better. What food you need to avoid to get to sleep. We need to be safe out in the sun and in the heat, and we need to drink water. Water should be our beverage of choice. We need to drink it throughout the day. It helps our bodies in so many different ways. It keeps us refreshed. It helps prevent muscle cramps in your legs and your feet and that type of thing. So take care of you. This is what's important, that you take care of yourself, because you can't take care of the people around you if you're not taking care of yourself first. So what I used was some fact sheets that we have in our, we have quite a number of peer-reviewed fact sheets at Rutgers. And if you check out any of these fact sheets that I've used, you'll see that there are lots and lots more there on a whole variety of topics. And take a look at them. We like to use them ourselves sometimes.